want to talk to you today about trauma responses. These are getting talked about more and more, which is wonderful as more and more people are doing therapy and really learning to understand themselves better, the things that they've been through and how they've responded. It is talked about a lot in social media, and that's really helpful to get information out there. But sometimes there's a lot of misinformation as well. And sometimes people have only heard of fight or flight and not some of these other responses that we've identified. So I wanted to go into some detail today and hopefully provide some clarity. My name is Cindy Meskey, and I am a therapist of over 20 years. I specialize in trauma, and I am certified in EMDR. Now, when we talk about these responses, these are innate automatic responses. These aren't things that we think out. This is not higher thinking. This is that reptilian part of the brain stem, that responds automatically when there's a threat. And the whole purpose is for us to survive, nothing else. Okay. So these are responses that happen very quickly if there's any thought process at all. So sometimes that is hard for people to understand as they're thinking back of why they responded in a certain way. But so I want to go over them in detail. So we have 5 F's. We have fight, flight, freeze, flop, and fawn. So fight is what it sounds like, right? We're going directly towards the threat. We are physically fighting. Sometimes we're verbally fighting or threatening, doing something to try to convince that potential threat to leave us alone, right? So anything where we're going towards the threat to try to get them to leave us alone is considered a fight response. And so flight is the opposite. In flight, we are running away from the danger, right? So we could be physically running away, or we might be avoiding a situation because we see it coming. We see a potential threat and we stay out, we avoid it. So those are the ones that people seem to have the best understanding of. They've been talked about for so many decades, right? Fight and flight. Beyond that, we have freeze. Freeze is a really common response. This happens when something is so overwhelming to our systems that we just freeze up. Our bodies become stiff and we stay still. Now, this can be helpful because we're not fighting off that potential threat. So we might decrease damage by not fighting. And sometimes this could look like us staying still and quiet so that potential threat doesn't know we are there. So that can be helpful in that sense. Now, the other thing that happens in freeze often is dissociation. So this is when our brain sort of leaves our body in a sense. We sort of check out so that we don't have to experience that right head on. When images and sensations are so disturbing that they are hard to handle, our brain will often sort of shut that down in order to protect us. So that also occurs in this freeze state. Now, in flop, instead of getting stiff, we're actually going limp. So it's this complete shutdown of the system and of the body. So someone might actually pass out or fall asleep. So this is just, again, what it sounds like, this complete shutdown where things are too disturbing to cope with. And so our body flops. Now, I have an example of this that a client shared with me. She and her family had been discussing something that had come to light in the family that was really disturbing. And one of the family members fell asleep during this discussion. This was so upsetting to them that they couldn't handle it, so their whole system just shut down. Beyond fight, flight, freeze, and flop, we have fawn. And this is a really common response that I talk with clients about all the time. This is when we put someone else's needs ahead of our own. We swallow our own emotions, our own needs, in order to try to protect ourselves by taking care of that other person, right? This is to prevent us from being harmed. This is to prevent that potential perpetrator from hurting us. So we sort of walk on eggshells and we imagine what that person is going to do or say, and we try to manage them. We try to manage their emotions. We try to manage their behaviors. We try to behave in a way that will not be objectionable to that potential perpetrator. So this happens so much with childhood abuse, so that we have all these people that have been parentified and have been in this role of taking care of their parents' emotions and behaviors to protect themselves. And so those responses tend to stick around as well. As we're talking about these, I wanted to touch on the idea that a lot of people judge their responses in a situation. So, for instance, someone might believe that it is strong to fight and that these other kinds of responses are weak. And what I want to say about that is that whatever you did in that situation kept you alive. And so it was the right thing to do, right? It got you to this place. And it's also, a situation where a lot of times fighting might cause you to die. It might make damage worse, things like that. There are plenty of situations where people will say that they wish they had fought, but then they're talking about abuse as a child. They're talking about a perpetrator that they never could have fought off and that they were much better off doing what they did because that allowed them to survive. So it's helpful to sometimes unpack those things, of why we're judging ourselves in a certain way and what is the reality of the situation. Now, in addition to these things being really helpful, adaptive responses when something big and traumatic is happening, right? They can also become maladaptive behaviors if we continue to do those things when there is no longer a threat. And this is what we see all the time in PTSD. We talk about this faulty alarm system where, someone is so used to bad things happening that they will see a threat when there isn't one. So you may have experienced this when, you have sort of a hypervigilant response. You're expecting something to go wrong, even though there's nothing actually there that's dangerous. So what this could look like in terms of, enlisting those responses in a maladaptive way could be becoming combative or freezing up or people pleasing, all these things that we did that could be really adaptive when there really is danger can be maladaptive, right? If we're responding from a trigger and not from a place of something that actually is a danger to us now. So then we got kind of stuck in these patterns, right? And a lot of people will come in identifying sort of their main response. And I think it's important to try not to identify too closely with something like that. It's important to understand your patterns, but this is not a fixed, characteristic about you. This is just how you responded, right? And you might have done it more than once, right? It may be something you struggle with, but it doesn't mean that those other responses aren't available to you or that this is just who you are. So I hope that that helps clarify some of those responses. And I'd love to really just get some dialogue going around these responses and understand what your questions are. And then I'd be happy to do more videos on the things that you want to know more about. So if this has been helpful, please hit the like button. And if you want more information about trauma or more meditation videos to help you or distance Reiki sessions, please hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you. Thank you for being here.